How is it working? Mic check, 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. It's telling me that it's good. Damn it. Hang on a minute. Hang on. Oh, now it's good. Okay. All right, yay. It's just there's a delay when you're going through this Zoom thing, so that's kind of weird to get used to, I guess. I haven't used it since I did the prepper trifecta with Eric and Che. All right, let me just get everything set up here. So I'm hearing from a lot of people that they are freaked out, and they're all worried about the situation in Ukraine, and it's spreading and it getting worse, and all those kinds of things. Of new preppers, not new preppers, who are coming to the channel, and they're saying things like, I'm really new to this, I don't know really what to do first, all that kind of stuff. Is this image mirrored from where it normally is? Sorry, it's just it's bugging me. Video settings. Let me see if I can fix this real quick. Hang on. Sorry about the delay. Oh, mirror. Nope, that's definitely backwards. Wait, which way looks right? Number 1 this way, or number 2 this way? Does it make any difference to you guys at all? Give you a second for the lag to catch up there. Or that way. Looks normal. Okay. All right. I'm going to leave it then. I ain't worrying about it. Okay. What's going on, David? Sniper 1, New England 2020. Paul Frank said there's no difference. Okay. That's what she said. All right. So I really, the only thing I had tonight was I was kind of going to go over like the commonality for disaster preparedness, like all the things, because like there's a million things that you could particularly worry about if you chose to, right? You could worry about nuclear war, you could worry about World War III, you could worry about EMPs, you could worry about economic collapse. But the good thing is that no matter what you choose to be your thing, they all really have the same things in common, that if you do these certain things, then you won't have any issues. You can handle most of it, or at least you'll handle it way better than anybody else, but if you guys have got questions, then throw them in the chat, and we'll do what we can to answer those. If you can make it like all caps, or put out reality survival, or do a super chat, or do something like that, then that will help me with recognizing, picking it out of the crowd here, because sometimes you guys get a little bit chatty. So we can just start with that, and as you have questions, then just throw them in there, and I'll try to answer them as we go. So this is probably, like I said, it's going to be a little bit of review for folks who watch the channel all the time, but I did also want to get into, now that I can screen share, since I'm using Zoom, after we get through this first stuff, then I'm going to pull up some charts and some diagrams and talk a little bit more about radiation fallout and that kind of stuff. So if you're still kind of unclear on it, because I've noticed in some comments that there are some people that are still not quite understanding everything. So, we can go over that too, if you guys want to. Sniper 1 says, grow your own toilet paper. You can do that. It's called the Woolly Mullen. It's a good Indian toilet paper. That's what we used to call it. All right, so there's really like, I'm gonna say there's like 20 important things to think about when you're prepping. Sometimes it's really easy to like freak out and be like, oh my God, I need to get this, or oh my God, I need to get this. And you don't really think about the things that are important. There's really not that many things that you really got to worry about. So New England 2020. So we'll go over those things in a second. New England 2020 asked, how likely is a nuke? The way I look at it is, he says, I'm not really prepared for that. I'm 15 miles from a major Air Force base. The way I used to look at it was that I thought that the chances of an all-out nuclear war with any country was less than 1%. Like, it just wasn't even really a serious concern. In my personal opinion, I think I've raised up to like, somewhere under the 5% range. But see, that while that's a multiple fold increase in concern, it's also still less than 95% chance. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that it's very realistic that there's going to be a nuclear war. And if you're watching my channel and you're wondering like, why do you keep talking about fallout and all that kind of stuff? It's because I was a survival instructor in the Air Force. And so we used to teach this stuff, and it's interesting to me, and I've never really had a good reason to put it on the channel. And so I thought, well, I'll go ahead and do these, some basic stuff on it. And I'm not really trying to help people become an expert in it. I just want you to understand a little bit about the mechanics and a little bit about the concepts. And then you can take those concepts and apply it to your situation. That's the whole goal here. You know what I mean? So that's why we're talking about it. Logistics 78 says, is iodine really a thing to help with radiation? Yes, it is. So basically, your thyroid tends to be a place that radioactive iodine tends to settle. And it's similar. Different types of isotope tend to settle in different parts of your body. I think strontium tends to go into your bones, and there's different ones. Okay, and so the one that we know has a very high risk of causing cancer is radioactive iodine. And so what you can do is it's a chelating agent, and you can basically take iodine pills, and what that does is your thyroid soaks up that iodine. And if your thyroid is already full with iodine because you took these pills, then when the radioactive iodine isotope comes through there, it won't interact with it. Basically, it'll just keep going. There's explanations for why all this happens and all that kind of stuff, but it has to do with the way that these isotopes decay and how they interact with your body and all that. I'm definitely not smart enough to really give a good explanation on it, but it does help. Now, the thing that I'm not certain about is, I know that you can take the potassium iodide tablets or the potassium iodate tablets. And I know you can also use like a 2% tincture of iodine, and you can wipe that I think it was like a 2 milliliter solution on your abdomen or on your forearm. And I did a video talking about the specifics of that. I don't remember exactly what it is. And that will absorb it and give you some protection. I don't know about using like iodine crystals. I don't know about using iodine water purification tablets. I'm not sure about all those things. I just haven't been able to find any literature to say whether or not those will actually work. So you're going to have to figure that one out. Most of the places are already out of stock with the pills, but you can still get the 2% tincture of iodine, and that does help. Okay, so Paul, he asks, generally speaking, how long can you use gas mask filters before replacing? I have to get extra pairs. So it all depends. So the only time that you would need to even have a gas mask on is if you're outside walking around while fallout is coming down. Okay. If you're staying in your shelter, which you should be as much as possible the whole time, then you probably would never even have to put a gas mask on. But it's not a bad thing to have just in case you do have to go out, because it's certainly a better fit than like an N95 mask. Okay. But an N95 will work better than nothing, or whatever, even cloth masks will work better than nothing, because most fallout, especially the more dangerous fallout, is bigger. It's larger. They say it's like a small sand size, or to a large sand size. Some of it can be lighter and smaller. That stuff tends to stay up in the atmosphere more and kind of come down like dust later on. But right after it happens, it's going to be the bigger stuff. Okay. So to answer your question, I think, if I remember correctly, we're reaching back way into my into my teaching here, is that generally in a chemical or biological environment, I think they were 8 hours for the filters. I think if I'm not mistaken, in a radiological environment, as long as the fallout isn't really heavy, then you may be able to get like up to 12. Don't hold me to that. I'm sure a quick Google search will give you a precise answer, but so yeah, I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 12 hours. Okay. But again, that's 8 to 12 hours of use if you're using it. So you probably only need 1 or 2 sets of filters, like, unless you think we're going to have an all-out nuclear exchange and it's going to be nuclear winter for months and years and all that. But that's just so unlikely to happen. If anything, it's way more likely it would be a limited exchange kind of situation. So I did a whole video on this stuff, guys, that you could take a look at as far as preventing radiation poisoning, and apple pectin. I talk about that in there. It also is a chelating agent. So is Tums, Gaviscon, vitamin C. Water helps flush these things out of your system. There were a couple others I don't remember right off the top of my head. Calcium, yeah, I can't remember for sure. But anyway, you can check out those videos. A tincture is a liquid, all safe cybersecurity. And I think in the video that I did, and I wish I remember the name of that video. To you, if once the video is over, I'll try to go back and find it and put it in the description below. All right, Kathy Little, please explain what. All right, so I'm going to cover the first one of these points while you guys are getting your stuff, your questions lined up here. So the first thing you want to do is make sure, you're kind of freaked out, not really knowing what to do as far as prepping goes and all that kind of stuff. Probably right away off the top is you want to go ahead and start getting some extra food. You can start stocking up your pantry and just fill your pantry up as much as possible. Okay. The just-in-time delivery system that we use in America is very fragile. And it is probably going to experience even more disruptions, more than we have so far, because of all the nonsense that's going on in Ukraine, and with Russia being one of the leading fertilizer producers in the world. China also being one of the leading producers, and they have outlawed the export of potash. So there's a good chance that the food supply over the next 6 months to 4 years, quite a while, is probably going to be spotty here and there. Now in America, we're going to be way better off than most people, and it's not like it's a situation where you're probably going to be in a situation where you're going to starve. But more likely, what is more probable is that you could see shortages in different regional areas pop up as those suppliers and distributors have a hard time getting certain items. And so if you have a good stock of stuff in your pantry already, you know, instead of just keeping one extra bottle of ketchup, maybe have 3 or 4 or 5, you know, or something like that. And just try to have several items deep. That way you can continue to consume and rotate the food that you have. And then when you go to the store, if they've got whatever you need, then pick up an extra one to replace the one that you use, you know, and you just kind of start this rotating thing like that. So that's the first layer. And I've got on my website, AmericanPreppingAcademy.com, I have a whole lesson that talks about, like, there's a spreadsheet that you can download that gives an example of what a family of 4, what the calorie content would look like, what the shelf life of certain items are, like over 100 different items. It's a real comprehensive spreadsheet that gives you a good idea of how to stock up and how much you might need and that's basically about 1 million calories per person. That's kind of the easy rounded out number. So that's the first layer, right? The second layer that you want to do is like in the situation of a radiological event, then I think probably the next best item to have for eating in a shelter, like inside your home in your basement, is going to be MREs. And the reason I say that is because you don't have to cook them per se, and they tend to stop you up a little bit, so you don't have to go to the bathroom so often. So that's a good thing. So having a few cases of MREs is probably a good thing. The last time I checked, ArmyNavySurplus.com had them for $70 a case. And I picked up a few cases not too long ago. And, you know, if you have a case per person in your house, if they're a case of 14 each, that's what these were, then that's going to, you know, if you do 1 MRE per day, which is probably all the calories you would need because you're just going to be sitting around doing nothing, then that'll get you through the 2-week period that you want to be in your shelter. So what's going on, Bush Doctor? So that's the second layer in this kind of situation. Then you look at a third layer for more of a long-term kind of situation. And that's where you want to put up a lot of calories in grains and legumes, rice and beans, beans and rice, oats, corn, wheat, you know, all that kind of stuff. And that is for more of a long-term extended situation. If you're, you know, just getting into this, you probably don't need to worry about this yet. But if you want to, you can put some of that stuff up in you know, 5-gallon buckets or whatever. And it's just good to have, because grains are really, and especially in a radiological situation, it's going to be a while before we can grow grains regularly. Because the weird thing about radiation is that you can have a can of food and it can have fallout next to it, and it gets the radiation that passes through it, and you can still eat the can of food. You can still drink the water, okay? But if you plant a plant in a field that has fallout in it, and the roots go down and they get intermixed with that fallout and everything, what they do is they pull up those radioactive isotopes into the plant and put it into the food. So you have to go out and actually clear off 8 to 10 inches of all that topsoil and everything, and then reestablish the topsoil, you know, with good compost and, you know, and fertilizers and all that, and then you can replant. So it takes a lot of time. So if you have those grains already stored up, that rice and beans and all that kind of stuff, for a year or so, potentially longer, then it's not that big of a deal to you that you're not going to be able to get those row crops, you know, kind of foods. Okay, so that's the idea. No, JD, I never did hear back from XMRE. So that's the third thing. And then the fourth thing is buying excuse me. The fourth thing is buying like buckets of freeze-dried or dehydrated food that are made for long-term storage. The reason these are good is primarily because of menu variety. A lot of them are really filled up with a lot of rice and beans and different kinds of grains and all that kind of stuff. But they've also mixed in all those different seasonings and flavorings and all that, and it'll store for up to 25 years in most cases. So you can buy it once, put it in the back of your closet, and forget about it. What I recommend is having, if you can afford it, get at least one bucket or so per person and put that away back in your closet, to start out with. And then if you can get more later, that's great. That'll give you some menu variety. Okay. And then what you do is you can supplement in the rice and beans that you have with those meals, and you can make that stuff last longer. You can also supplement it in with the stuff in your pantry to make the stuff in your pantry last longer. And, it's just kind of a good strategy for as far as that goes. I have the way that I structure my channel is I use only affiliates so that I don't ask you guys to pay for anything, because I don't really like, in the economic times that we have, I don't like asking you guys to pay like a Patreon or all that kind of stuff. And so I use affiliates, and I have an affiliate for getting food buckets. If you want one, it's realitysurvivalfood.com. It's through My Patriot Supply. So you can check those guys out if you decide you want to get some. All right, let me see if I missed what questions I missed here. If I did, again, try to put it in all caps if you need to see it and pick it out of the crowd. Yeah, Dave Himlin says, turn off your TV and you won't be freaked out. That's a fair point. Logistics 78 said he just drove through California in diesel, $6.70 a gallon. Oof, that's ridiculous. Kathy, did you ever put in here what you wanted me to explain? I'm not really sure what it is. All right. Or maybe you're asking somebody else to explain. I don't know. Okay. Utah Mike says your biggest fear is chemical weapons. They're really, well, in like World War I, they could be used effectively because you had, two lines, you were holding the line, and, when the wind was right, you could launch the chemical weapons and it would go over the whole crowd and all that kind of stuff. More than one time, the wind reversed and that bit them in the butt. And, so that's not always a real predictable thing. And that's probably why you don't see it happen or see it used very often. The one time I can think of a chemical weapon being used in a terror attack was Shinrikyo in Japan. And they use sarin gas in the subways, and that environment allowed it to stay a little bit more concentrated, and that kind of thing. But outside, the winds are so unpredictable and all that kind of jazz. It really makes them hard to use. So to me, I don't really worry about chemical weapons personally that much, and same thing with biological. I mean, you can have COVID type biological things, but when it comes to like anthrax and stuff like that, it's just hard to make a widespread delivery system. Okay. Yeah, Jones MR says no real need for nukes or chem weapons. Just take down our power grid, and we'll fight amongst ourselves. So that's true. That's 100% true. Getting the power grid to go down would be a trick, unless you're just a really brilliant 15-year-old and in Russia who's been given the okay to, launch your 0-day attack on the system or whatever. But it could happen. I've talked about it multiple times. It's possible. MRE's meals refusing to exit. That's nice, Jay Hal. Let's see. Yeah, 100%. Paul Frank says bouillon cubes can help bring a variety to your beans and rice. Yeah, that was a real common meal when we'd have to cook for a whole bunch of students, is you just dump in a whole bunch of rice and beans and stuff, and then throw in a whole bunch of bouillon, and then that was just the soup. It's just, you just boil it all together, and then they just eat it, eat it out of there and drink the water and all that kind of stuff, and good stuff. Let's see. Oh, what did that say? Best place to hide your food is get a couple of 1,000-gallon fiberglass septic tanks and interconnect them to your base and go and hedgehog. Yeah, I mean, you could do that for sure. You just, make sure that you've figured out some way to get in and out effectively. That would be probably the weirdest part about it all, is situating it right so you can get in and out of it. Because if it's not down far enough, where you've got 3 feet or 2 to 3 feet or so of soil all the way around it, then you're still not really doing any good. You know what I mean? So you have to figure out the whole entry system, but I'm sure it wouldn't be that big of a deal to do if you wanted to do it that way. It's probably kind of a cheap man's bunker kind of thing. Cost to fill up his tractors tripled in 2 years. Man, that's crazy. Bush Doctor Survival. He says, what advice do I have for maintaining my chickens in case of a radiological event? I'd probably just eat them first. I mean, I don't really have any great advice for that. I mean, it all depends on what your setup is. If you've got a huge barn, you could throw them inside the barn and hope for the best. Who knows? Yeah, it just depends. It just depends on where you're at. There's so many variables in all these things. That brings up a good thing here. Let me see if I can find this picture that I was wanting to share with you guys. Where is it? Yeah, I have to pull it up before I can screen share. So hang on just a second here. Oh, somebody's coming in. Hey.
Yo, what's up, stream?
What are you doing? All right. So here's this. That's my son. He's being a geek. All right. Screen share. Where's it at? Oh, here we go. I'm gonna pick it now. This one. And share. Okay. So I thought this was a cool graphic to kind of help explain this thing. This is just an example of a 10 kiloton fallout map, essentially. And as you can see, the purple area here is in the first 1 to 3 hours. This is an example of what the heavy fallout zone or the dangerous fallout zone would look like. Okay, and it says up here that bounded by radiation levels of around 10 Roentgens per hour, acute radiation injury is possible within the dangerous fallout zone. It could reach 10 to 20 miles an hour downwind. The decay of the radiation causes the zone to shrink after about 1 to 3 hours. So then you see 6 hours here, same thing. This dangerous fallout zone has gotten a lot smaller. The, what are they calling this? The hot zone is a little larger, all right? But you're only in this hot zone here, you're only looking at levels of 0.01 Roentgens per hour or 10 milliroentgens per hour. Okay, so it's a lot less dangerous. So unless you just happen to live right in the dangerous fallout zone, you are probably not going to be experiencing massive levels of radiation. And that's, I think a lot of people are really freaking out about this, thinking that it's just going to be like, some life-ending situation or whatever. If you just know the basics and just try to stay out, stay in your basement, stay out of the fallout as much as you possibly can, thinking about time, distance, and shielding, then you're most likely not going to have a situation. I mean, look at this, after 48 hours, your dangerous fallout zone is tiny. It's literally in the blast zone. Okay, you're within a half a mile of the where the bomb went off. And if that's the case, you're probably already dead if you're in that zone, right? So then you've got the hot zone out here, and it's starting to get smaller and smaller by the hour. So it's not a real huge, it's a problem, and you need to be aware of it. But it is not something that is super, like super crazy dangerous. You just have to understand, how to deal with it. and how to live with it. So hopefully that makes some sense. Okay. Yeah, Kathy, you can use a gas mask filter more than once over a period of several days. I think it's like if you're gonna wear it continuously, they say it's about 8 hours. And most of the reason for that is because of all the moisture from your breath, actually, not because the filter is getting so clogged up. But so about 8 to 12 hours of continuous use, somewhere in that range. So if you only are going outside, because again, like I said earlier, the only reason you'd need to be wearing a gas mask is because you're going outside of your shelter. So if you're going outside of your shelter when the fallout's coming down, there better be a good reason. Like you should have a good reason. You shouldn't just be out there. All right. You should stay inside when the fallout is coming down. So if you have a good reason to go out, do what you got to do, and then get back inside. Make sure you dust off, change your clothes, get any dust and all that stuff off of you as soon as you come back inside. Okay. So yeah, bush doctor, the thing is, man, is there's so many variables on knowing where you're at, how much you're getting. If you live in a suburban or like on the suburban rural fringe, you're probably not going to be in a situation where you're going to have too much fallout to worry about, but if you had a barn, I'd put them in the barn. That's probably about the best you're going to do, to be honest with you. Buffalo Bob, I don't think there'll ever be full out nuclear war. Personally, I really don't. I don't think it'll ever happen. It just doesn't. It doesn't benefit anybody. It doesn't. It doesn't serve any purpose, and it's just super, super unlikely. Okay, what else we got here? Yeah, there are such things as neutron bombs where there's a lot less radiation. Basically, the radiation decays a lot faster, and it still does property damage. They're pretty intense, but it doesn't have as much longer lasting radiation. That's my understanding anyway. I'm not sure to what extent people use them and all that kind of stuff, though. Okay, so killing 110, it's very easy. You just have to throw enough power stations offline, and the power grid will shut down to prevent damage to equipment due to being frequency. Yeah, I mean, if it were really that easy, though, I'm pretty sure that North Korea and Iran and the Russian hackers would have already done it. You know what I mean? So it's not that easy. It's not. I mean, it can be done. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying that if it were just child's play, then we would have seen it by now. All right. And in the last few years, there has been some pretty significant efforts made to start making them a little bit more resilient. All right. Yeah, Jones MR, and that's what he says, that there's no time limit for gas mask filters. It really, you'll be able to, if it's starting to get clogged, then it'll be hard to breathe in. And that's what I was saying earlier is with the moisture and stuff like that, it starts to get harder to breathe in after a certain point. And that's when they recommend, changing it out and everything. So there's no real like hard and fast answer on that. It all kind of just depends. Ozark Hiker 23 says, do you stock up on oil filter, hydraulic fluid, and all that for the tractor behind you, and how much? Yeah, so I have some. I think I've probably only got 6 or 8 gallons, and I need to get another set of filters actually. But I have some hydraulic fluid and all that. But I need to do the service on it. Actually, I haven't I haven't done it, so I need to get it done. What I would recommend, I mean, it's probably good to have a set or 2 on hand of the filters and everything. I just haven't gotten those yet, but I do have some hydraulic oil. Yeah, I'm not sure. That's what she said. He says titanium is corrosive resistant to store radioactive materials inside of. I think it's a good way to store medical supplies and stuff. I'm not really sure how well titanium does. It's probably basically just like any other metal. It's all based on density. Lead is kind of this industry standard, but any steel or anything like that is going to help reduce it. What's going on, Romy Davis? That's not true. Harley Hillbilly says there's no safe place if they use numerous nukes. Nuclear winter will kill everything. Yeah, that's not actually true. There's a lot of it, just like everything else that has to do with nukes. There's a lot of overblown fear out there about nuclear winter. You'll probably see some temperature dropping and that kind of thing. You're obviously going to have issues with topsoil and stuff like we talked about earlier. But the earth is pretty effective at cleaning itself, and it has to do with precipitation and all that kind of stuff. And especially here in America, where we have a lot of bodies of water and we have regular precipitation, you're going to find that that's going to help pull all that stuff out of the air a lot quicker than what people generally think. So Jeremy Talcott says, oh, hold on, Paul Frank, the link is ki4u.com. That is where you can buy new ones, and you can have old ones like checked. Otherwise, you can get them on eBay and stuff like that. Although a lot of them are probably sold out now. So Jeremy Talcott says, talk about the threat of the New World Order. So the term New World Order is used and overused, and generally speaking, it's referring to the Bretton Woods Agreement. And I just recently learned a lot of this stuff from the books that I've recommended to you guys many times from Peter Zehan. And what's happening now is that the United States is pulling back from our initial agreement with Bretton Woods. And we're going through a period of de-globalization. And I know that sounds funny because everybody thinks, but it's a global new world order. Well, there's a certain fraction of people in the World Economic Forum and all that kind of stuff who are working on trying to consolidate Europe into one government, all the countries of NATO and the European Union into one government. And the primary vehicle for doing that is the World Economic Forum, and establishing these ESG scores and everything, and trying to get everybody to be on the same page. And Macron is the president of, or prime minister, whichever one is, of France, is really big on this because France has a lot of sway and everything. So they're trying to get everybody under one system of governance, because they have to consolidate Europe before they can move to try to do a global one world kind of thing, right? Because there are a lot of long-standing historical grievances all across Europe. And if you can't get them all on board, then nothing else is going to happen either. So the WEF is trying to use these crises like COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine and all that kind of stuff to pull everybody together. And part of the issue is there's a certain group of people in the United States who are also trying to keep that globalism thing going. The problem is they're going to fail. It's not, it isn't, it's just not in the strategic interest for the United States to continue doing what it's been doing and patrolling all the world's oceans and maintaining free trade between all these countries. We're going to go back to a time prior to World War II in the beginning of the 19th century, where it's more of a hemispheric kind of cooperation. Really, the only two trading partners that we need, that we seriously need, is Canada and Mexico. But now that we have shale oil and all that, we don't really need very much from very many people. One thing that I always that I didn't know was that as a country, we only import like 8%. It was 8 or 13% of our GDP into the country in imports. And that's crazy because I thought we got everything from China. And it seems like we do. But these cheap little trinkets and toys and everything like that don't really amount to much of our global domestic, or gross domestic product. And so we can do without a lot of that stuff, and I think I think we're moving to that way where we're going to be reindustrializing. The Mexican labor market looks perfect in their demographics, and they're relatively skilled, and it's a great place to be. And then with Canada, resources and all that kind of stuff, we're actually set up in America. We're actually set up for the long term, beyond 5, 10, 15, 20 years. We're set up really, really well. And that's a positive thing to think about. Now, the problem is that the next 2 to 4, 3 to 5, somewhere in there are going to be pretty shaky, but long term, we're good. I mean, I firmly believe that we're very, very good to go in the long term, but it could be pretty shaky between now and then. Okay, so that's my take on the New World Order. It's the World Economic Forum, Agenda 2030, whatever you want to call it. It's these guys trying to do this stuff, but everybody's not on board. And the big macro factors that are pushing all this stuff, which Peter Zeihan talks about in his books, it's not something that politicians really have a lot of control over. So it doesn't even really matter what they do. We're headed in this direction. And with Russia happening and Russia and China's strategic alliance and all that kind of stuff, it's just making it happen faster. So yeah, so Marco Kless says, would a sealed off face mask with M3 filters work for fallout, or would I need a full gas mask? No, you can just use even just an N95 mask if it's fitted correctly. You just want to make sure that you fit it correctly and so that you get a good seal on it. But like I said earlier, the fallout is generally speaking going to be bigger. It's going to be, larger particulate. So an N95 will do fine. It'll do fine. Tuck Firent says 50 guys could take down the whole power grid. They could if they knew what to do. Luckily, most people don't. All right. Matthew Stone, thank you. Appreciate the $5. Did you have a question, or are you just being awesome? All right. Let's see. Did I have anything else? Okay, that's a good question. So JJWW says, nuke shockwave goes through multiple buildings. Does it go through terrain elevation also? So not really. Let me pull up another. Little graphic for you. Just kind of showing a little bit about the blast and all that kind of stuff. It's an older one, but it's pretty good, I think. It's really not as big as you might think, and it depends on how big the missile is, and it depends on a lot of stuff, where it's detonated, the height, and all that kind of jazz. So we're not talking about specifics here, but just to give you an idea. So this is a 1 megaton airburst, okay? And across the bottom are miles, if I remember correctly. And so you're looking at, 1 PSI is where you're going to get, some broken windows and stuff like that, I believe. And so you're talking about light damage to commercial type buildings. That's out 11 miles from the zone on a 1 megaton bomb, which is a pretty good sized bomb. in between the 4 mile range and the 7 mile range, you know, you're looking at 5 to 2 psi. You're going to have with the thermal blast and everything, you're going to have lots of fires and all that kind of stuff. And underneath 4 miles is going to be basically leveled. Now, if you have a big hill or something like that here, then that is definitely going to, you know, reduce the way that shock wave hits you. What'll probably end up happening is you'll have an area kind of behind the hill. If there was a big hill like right here, I don't know if you guys can see my cursor or not. Hopefully you can. Then there's probably going to be an area of a shadow where you don't have so much of an impact right here, but then you know, you might have some residual coming on the outside or wherever. Sort of think about it kind of like a radio wave, you know. It's, I don't know, that's the best way I could think of to potentially put it. The terrain does help, but there may still be some effects on the other side. So Jones MR says EMPs will kill newer vehicles. So if you have an older vehicle, it might work afterwards. Problem is that you'll become a very loud target in a quiet environment. So I think it was the most recent commission on EMPs said that about 60 to 70% of vehicles on the road would be affected in some way, shape or form. But that means that, you know, about 30% or so are still going to probably run. I know a lot of people out there will tell you, no, every vehicle is going to not run, you know, but that's not really the case. Especially a lot of new more modern vehicles with a lot of different electronics and stuff like that in them have a pretty decent degree of shielding built in them as it is. So it all really depends on what you're driving, where you're at, what the geography is around you, how far you were from a detonation. I mean, there's just tons and tons of variables. One thing you can do though is you can put an EMP shield in your car. It's super easy to install. I've done a couple of videos on it. I have them on 2 of my trucks, and they're about 300-ish bucks, and it's like 4 wires or so to wire in. Super easy, and use the discount code Reality Survival, and it'll save you $50 per unit. The advantage that gives you is it lets you know that your vehicle would still run, and you're going to be able to get home after, you know, a detonation, because even a localized nuclear detonation will cause an EMP for several miles outside of the blast. So usually roughly about line of sight. So it's possible that even a localized detonation could cause some problems. But then you've got all the fuel in your tank. You can still use that for however long it lasts. So if you keep it above half, that's good. And then if you store some additional fuel at home, then that would help you be able to evacuate if you needed to, or it would help you just, you know, be able to do whatever you need to do. Now, you're going to probably want to take back roads. You're going to try to stay off of highways and those kind of things if you did have to travel, because the roads are going to be a mess, you know. So maybe you might not want to put one on like a small little car or something like a little Toyota or Honda, but maybe on a like a bigger truck, so you could push vehicles out of the way and stuff if you needed to. Just a thought. I don't know. All right. Thank you, JJWW. I appreciate that, man. All right. Let's see. Trying to catch up on my points here. R. Allen says, I guess we'll never get to join the Federation. No Starship Enterprise. Bummer. Did you hear the story about the Israeli space chief supposedly on his deathbed said that he was aware that we had been contacted by aliens and that there is this federation that they're waiting for us to join or whatever at some point? I thought that was pretty funny. I have any idea if it's true or not. I thought it was kind of hilarious. Cool. No, you didn't have any question, Matt. All right, sounds good. You know, that's what she said. asks, would safety glasses be recommended if you're not going with a full-blown gas mask? It couldn't hurt, you know. But what the real concern is with fallout, you're going to get gamma radiation exposure. There's no way to stop that. I mean, there is a way to stop it if you have like a full-blown bunker and all that kind of stuff, but the majority of people are going to get some gamma radiation stuff, and it's probably not going to hurt you at all. It's probably going to be totally fine for the vast majority of people. Although gamma radiation is very penetrative, sometimes it passes through your body and it doesn't even interact with you. It's dangerous, but it's not as dangerous as you think unless you get a lot of it in a very short period. But if you just get a little bit here and there over a longer period of time, it's not that big of a deal. But the concern with fallout, though, is that you ingest it and inhale it. And if you do that, it doesn't just pass through you, it stays in there, and it's directly going to affect your cells a lot quicker and make you sicker. And it's harder to get out. So that's the concern with fallout. That's why you want to make sure you don't breathe it in if you go out there. And it's just all the way around better if you just stay inside your shelter and don't be in it. So you could wear goggles. It's not going to hurt anything, but it's probably not, that big of a deal. Harley Hillbilly says you can just wrap your car in tinfoil. Yeah, you can do that too, I guess. Good luck getting the bottom of that all. That might be kind of difficult. So disposable hero, I just did a video on this the other day. You should go take a look at it. He says after the bombs, the nuclear power plants start melting down. That is not true. Not true at all. As soon as there is any problem like that, as soon as there is any big issue that is going to affect the grid or affect the power production, all that kind of stuff, the people who work in the plants are going to scram the system and they're going to shut it down. And it happens in like literally seconds. You can stop the fission process in seconds. It doesn't take long at all. Then all they have to do is they have to make sure that the rods stay cool with water coming in and all that kind of stuff. There's lots of redundancy and backups. I talk about it all in that video. It is not some given that they're going to melt down. And in America, the way that they're built, even if they did melt down, the containment structures around them are amazing. They're really, 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 really good. And so it's going to be contained. Okay. I mean, it's a very, very unlikely thing to where you're going to have a catastrophic failure that is going to go around all the safety precautions that they have built in, all the ways that they have to cool it down, which are multiple, and that the containment system is going to fail. And on top of that, that they could physically flood it manually to make sure that it stays cool. So it's really not a concern, man. Everybody gets all freaked out about this, and it's just not the case. So Lael 692K7. I have always told people, and I probably should have mentioned that before I talked about it now, but I tell everybody regularly. He says $300 of food versus EMP shield. If you don't have any of your preps done, you shouldn't be buying an EMP shield. You should be buying food. Okay, that's why I talked about that first just now. $300 of food is going to get you, going a good direction, especially if you try to buy cheap, buy in bulk, and all that kind of stuff. You need to have your basics squared away before you're buying an EMP shield or anything like that. That is something that is, lower tier on the concern list, more of an advanced thing, that kind of thing. Now, if you've got 10 ARs, or something like that, and you're buying a whole bunch more guns, then you might think, well, do I need a vehicle? Like maybe that would be the kind of thing, where if I've already got food and water and power generation and all those basics covered, now maybe I want to have some transportation, or something like that. So something like that. Okay. South Florida, DCL, JJ, what about high gauge plastic sheathing for duct tape for windows? I talked about this in a video the other day too. If you live in a zone like we just looked at in that thing graphic a little bit earlier, where you've gotten windows blown out and all that kind of stuff, then you should put some plastic sheeting over those windows to keep the fallout from coming in your house. Okay. If none of your windows blew out, then you really probably don't have any reason to worry about anything. I mean, if you wanted to stuff some towels underneath the doors, you know, where the door sweep is, or you know, something like that, maybe just, you know, if you've got a drafty window, maybe put some plastic over it or something. But if your house normally doesn't have a whole bunch of dust coming into it, you don't got to worry about it. A lot of people are talking about having to seal up their whole house and everything, and I just don't know. I don't know what people are talking about, because that is not necessary. It's completely not necessary. All right. Yeah, if you got an older vehicle, Randall Kelly says a 1955 Ford, and he removes the points when it's stored and all that kind of stuff. I don't think the points are going to be messed up on it, Randall, but it doesn't hurt to take them off, or doesn't hurt to have a spare pair. You might, I don't think on a 55 you have an internal voltage regulator in the alternator, but if you did, that could be something to think about potentially. And if it has a, you know, if it's an older vehicle, like a 1980 to, you know, 1974, I think, when they had the HEI ignitions, especially in the GMs, I know they did, then you might want to have one of those HEI ignition modules as well for older vehicles. But as a general rule, if you have a vehicle that's older than 1980 and back, then you probably don't need an EMP shield either, because they don't have sensitive electronics in them. Paul Frank, he says, what's the deal with apple juice I keep hearing about? It's, people are misinformed. Apple juice doesn't do anything for you at all, as far as I know, for radiation as a chelating agent. Apple pectin does, but apple juice doesn't. And I don't know why everybody who's spreading that around, I'm not sure. But there's nothing with apple juice. All right. Yeah, I have. Stephen M says, have you seen those shelters made of concrete fabric that blow up, and you cover them in water and activate the concrete to harden it? I have. Those are pretty cool. I don't think it's thick enough, unfortunately, for like a nuclear shelter or whatever, but those are pretty badass. They're kind of neat. I have seen those. All right. So, all right, I'm going to cover while you guys are coming up with some more questions. I'm going to go into my other little thing I was going to talk about here. So number 2 on the list of 20. So I better hurry up with this. How long have we been going? I don't even know. Somebody can tell me in the comments maybe. All right. Holy cow, we've already been going an hour. Okay. So number 2 is water bottles. And hold on a sec. Okay, whatever. Water, not water bottles, water. You want to have some additional water for your house. And if you're in a situation where you can't really store a lot of water and all that kind of stuff, that's fine. You can just have some storage containers so that if something happens, you can fill it up real quick and kind of deal with it then. Water bobs are a good way to do that for people in like apartments or in suburbs or something like that. You can also get the big 55-gallon rain barrels. I've showed you guys some of the 15-gallon blue barrels from like Walmart that I got. Those are pretty good. You got the 5-gallon containers for camping. Those will work fine. But you also need to have a way to filter the water and to make sure that there's no, in a nuclear situation, no fallout. But in any other survival situation, you just need to make sure the water's safe to drink from pathogens and from, bacteria and protozoa and cysts and all that kind of stuff. I did a whole lesson talking about water and filtering out water, radiation and fallout from water. You can check that out if you want. But I'll give you two primary things that are great for that and for this situation, but you need to watch that whole lesson to understand all the components, okay? The Alexa Pure Pro is one really good way. They do remove all, or 96% or something like that, of the radionuclides. And also the new Aqua 7-stage reverse osmosis system. Did a video on it as well. I confirmed with the company, and they remove 99% of radionuclides. And they've got some, and that system is like, I thought they'd be really expensive. It was like $250-ish, something like that. Link below if you want to check them out. Okay, so have water. You know, water is very important. You need to have water. You also think about how you're going to transport water. If you live close to a water source, that's great. If you've got like a pond like I do here, or if you've got a river or stream or something, maybe you got to go a little bit further. How are you going to transport that stuff? So one of the solutions that I have is I have like a 25-gallon sprayer tank that sits on the back of the ATV. And then I can just fill that up with some 5-gallon buckets and bring it home and then go through the filtering process, you know, at home. But you might be able to use a 25-gallon thing like that with a wheelbarrow if you don't have like an ATV, or you could use it, you could set it on a 2-wheel dolly, you know, or something like that. Point is that, I mean, maybe you just have to use a couple of 5-gallon buckets, but have some way to transport a larger amount of water back to your home. Because in a long-term situation where you're having to filter your water every day, and you have to do showering, and you have to do cooking, and you have to do, you know, sanitation, all these things, then you're going to use a lot of water. You're probably going to be using anywhere from 3 to 8 gallons per day. All right, it's per person. It's a lot of water. So water is going to be a big deal for you in a real true situation where you don't have city water anymore. So think about the mechanics behind all that and how you're going to do it. Do some research ahead of time, find out where the water sources are and all that kind of stuff. All right. Yeah, Berkey's good too. I like the Alexa Pure Pro better, but I'm an affiliate with them too. You can go to realitysurvivalfood.com. They sell those as well. I don't remember what the price on them was, but I think it's couple $100, $240, something like that. I don't remember. So Buffalo Bob, he says, do ceramic filters get rid of radiation? So not necessarily. I go back and watch the video that I did on removing fallout. It goes into that whole thing. They are going to help for sure, but they're not going to get everything. Okay. All right. Baylor Bear 03 says that he watched some of Peter Zehan's videos. He's an interesting thinker, but he's way off on Putin. Russia didn't invade because of an aging population, but because of Biden's weak leadership. That certainly that certainly probably plays a factor into it. But Russia has always expanded its borders back since Catherine the Great. And they said that the only way Russia can be, back then, the only way Russia can be secure is by expanding our borders. And it's because of their geography, where they are, that they're worried about it. That's why he did it. That's the concern that that's the reasoning behind it. It has everything to do with securing their borders. He's correct on that, in my opinion. Biden being weak is just a part of the manifestation of, yeah, all the things are lining up. I'm not going to have the army in 2 years. I don't think the United States is going to do too much about it. I need to fill these security gaps. So I'm going to go. You know what I mean? There were lots of things that came into play, and he actually called back in 2014 in his first book that Russia would go into Russia no later than 2022. So he called it pretty on the money. I mean, that's pretty damn impressive. You can go and read the book and see for yourself that he called it that many years ago. So there's something going on there. So Gil Gallatin says, would an Air Force base for mobile early warning semi trucks that scatter, drive multiple directions, be a target if the balloon goes up. I'm not quite sure what you're asking, brother. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what you're asking. So if you can clarify a little bit for me, I'll try to answer. But so Baylor Bear says thoughts on a potential Iran deal. I think there absolutely will be an Iran deal. And I never fully understood the purpose with the Iran deal in the Obama era until I heard Zihan, his explanation. And I think it makes sense. I don't agree with everything the guy says, just so you guys know. I definitely don't agree with all of his politics. I don't agree with all of his takes on a lot of stuff. But when you're talking about the macro things, the big level pushing concepts, he gets a lot of that stuff really, really, really right, I think. Here's the thing. If the United States is no longer going to be dependent on foreign oil, and we're not in the long term, that's all going to be opened back up. And so that's not even a concern. That's going to happen. We're not going to be dependent on foreign oil. That means we don't have an interest in Saudi Arabia anymore. Saudi Arabia, dealing with them has, not been a great relationship, as you can imagine. And so it makes a lot of sense to me because their concern in the region is Iran, right? That's who they are. Everything about their existence is completely threatened by Iran, has been by Persia for many, 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 many years, and it will continue to be so. If we're moving to a period of deglobalization where we're not going to be involved in all those things anymore, then does it make strategic sense to give Iran a little bit more breathing room so that the two of them have to contend with each other? That's a strategic question for the leadership of the country to answer. I'm not probably qualified to make that assessment, but I could see why somebody would do that. Do I think it's necessarily the right thing? Probably not. I mean, I'm not 100% sure that I think that deglobalization is the right thing, that pulling back from our role as the world's policeman is the right thing. I mean, the last 70 years have been relatively peaceful, and it's worked pretty well. So maybe we should stay doing those things. The problem is it doesn't look like we are. So, I don't know. I'm not sure if there'll be a deal, but it wouldn't surprise me one little bit. All right. But that also has consequences, though. Baylor Bear, the Iran deal has consequences because if the deal is structured in a way that Israel believes that Iran is going to get a nuclear weapon, then you can be sure that Israel will protect its own strategic interests. And so that could potentially cause a significant flare-up. I saw a headline just the other day where the UAE, Saudi, Egypt, and Israel, I think it was those three plus Israel, just had a meeting. That's a big deal because that's a pretty big signal that they are aligning strategically. They're aligning their interests strategically. And for Egypt and UAE and Saudi to align with Israel, that means they got to be worried because they don't like Israel. Regardless of the Abraham Accords and all that kind of stuff, they don't like Israel. I can promise you that. Jared Williamson says, do you agree with Zihan that George H.W. Bush was one of our better presidents in modern times? I think you have to give the man his due on foreign policy. I was pretty young back then. When we went into Iraq the first time, I was like 16. So I wasn't really all that into politics and all that kind of stuff. So I can't be too sure. But looking back with the lens of history, the stuff that he points out fairly accurate. What he didn't really cover on is, his previous time in the CIA as a director of CIA, and the decisions that he was making as the leader of the CIA were the decisions that caused Russia, or caused the USSR, to fail. So he was in the position that had the biggest amount of influence to stop the Soviet Union. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal for a lot of people. And so, yeah, I think he did a lot of good. I don't know that I agree with him as a neocon, that kind of thing on all issues and everything. I'm more of a constitutional libertarian. The Bushes are kind of like Trump. They've never seen a bailout package they won't sign. They're big spending Republicans, and I'm perfectly not. I don't believe that. I think that we need a small federal government with larger state governments, so that people can be involved in their government at a local level, and they can control their own environment a lot easier. All right, that's what I would like to see, where the federal government was drastically shrunk, and the states could have a whole bunch of little experiments going all over and see what they like, see what works, and pick and choose the best aspects of things from different states. So that's my personal politics. Yeah, Baylor, I'm not 100% sure that we're even dealing with Iran. I think it's more along the lines, and I'm not sure, because I haven't seen what terms they're working out with and all that kind of stuff. I know they're talking about taking the IRGC off the terror watch list, which that's pretty crazy to me. But I think it's more along the lines of giving Iran some breathing room, so that they can cause a little bit more of strategic tension in the region. Is kind of the way that I read it. And I think that the US knows that Israel will deal with the nuclear threat before it's developed. That's my personal take. Oh, yeah. So Gil, with regards to your question, I'm not able to really talk about that subject, because A, I don't know too much about it. B, there are certain aspects of it that are not allowed to be publicly discussed. So I can't really say too much there. I don't think that it would be a target, though. That's too small, too insignificant. There's going to be, like I said, it's most likely it would be a limited exchange if it was. And so you're going to be looking at major infrastructure ports, major infrastructure, financial hubs, and those kinds of things. Nuclear or military targets aren't really that big of a concern. It's not that they're not a concern. Don't get me wrong. There would be some military targets that would be, but small systems and stuff like that, I don't really think so. Personally, I might be wrong. I don't know. So do you know, okay, so somebody says, I never liked the reversed flag on the arm. Do you know why the flag is this way, Plan B? When it's on a uniform or clothing, it's always this way, as if the pole were here coming down, and the person is moving forward, because we don't retreat. And so there's a symbolism to it, as the reason is we're always moving forward. That's the idea behind it anyway. Go get you some chickens, Rhonda. You just got a piece of land or something, didn't you? Go get you some chickens and get you a chicken coop. She said she just saw them at Ace Hardware for $3.99. Yeah, it all Matthew Stone says any Air Force base could be a target, or any military base. It really depends. It really depends on what the strategic goals are, and what the purpose is, and all that kind of stuff. If it's an all out launch where they're launching everything, then of course anything's on the table. But in a limited exchange, which is, would be way more likely, you're probably going to see big city centers and big infrastructure areas targeted even before military bases. Okay. Well, Plan B, he says, I understand the modern explanation, but it's still a reverse flag, but it's an authorized one. Yep. All right. So let me go on to the next points here. I've already been on over an hour. I don't generally like to go over an hour, but I'm going to keep going here. Okay. So the next one on the list after water, food, water, power generation. And power generation is important. You can do multiple different things. You can do whole house generator, something where you can just literally run your whole house. If you had an EMP shield installed in your house, EMP shield installed for your whole house generator, and a fuel system, like a 1,000-gallon propane tank or something like that, then you could run it for quite a while. You could run your house for quite a while, and that give you a little advantage. Help you keep refrigeration in your meat, stuff like that longer, all that kind of stuff. You can also get a smaller generator, something in the 10 to 12,000 watt range. Maybe install a small transfer switch on your house so you can run like 5 or 6 major circuits. If you live in a rural area, you can run your well. Maybe you run, your refrigerators and some lights and those kinds of things. Or you can get a even smaller 4 to 7,000 watt range generator and just run extension cords, plug in your refrigerator, plug in, the things that you need, have some lights, those kind of stuff, those kind of things. Or for a longer term situation, you could look at solar panels and solar generators. And those are good for smaller scale production, unless you're going to spend a lot of money. If you're going to spend a lot of money, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, whatever, then you could potentially run your whole house. But that's a big investment, right? Whole house generator nowadays probably going to run you somewhere between 7 and 8, something like that, for like the Generac, like I did. But it just depends. So number 5 is fuel. 5-gallon fuel cans are good. They're easily portable. I recommend having at least 6 of those, so you have at least 30 gallons. If you can, think about getting an agricultural transfer tank. I would say that fuel is probably only going to be an issue, or potentially have shortages here in the States over the next 12 to maybe 36 months, maybe less than that, maybe 24. Depends on how long the leftists kind of try to keep us off of producing our own fuel. But you need to have some extra fuel, because there's a good chance in the coming months and years that we're going to have some intermittent shortages. Could be from cyber attacks, could be from global supply issues. There's just a lot of different factors that could play into this. But having some additional fuel at your house is a good idea. Jones, so it's a great point that you bring up. He says that just remember, if you're the only house that lights up, people will show up at your doorstep. They sure will. And what I like to say to people about that is that in a high threat situation like that, you should already have a security plan in place, and you should expect that you're going to have to deal with those kind of issues. But that shouldn't necessarily keep you from utilizing the advantages that you can get from having power. So it is a good consideration, though, for sure. All right. Communications. So communications is the next one. If cell phones, landlines are down, then radios are going to be a really good backup. Okay. And this is applicable in pretty much any kind of a disaster scenario. It could be a tornado, could be just an ice storm, could be localized power outages, could be whatever. Just having a multi-channel radio that receives AM, FM, weather, short band or shortwave, long wave, single sideband, and aviation is a good start. That's going to be that's a small receiver. I'll show you guys one in a review before long. You can get a little CC Crane radio that's got all those different bands in it for $150, $160, something like that. Good quality little radio. And you can get a ton of information from those, especially when you put an extended antenna on it. you can really, really gather a lot of information and understand what's going on around you. Those are a great little tool. Then go ahead and add in some basic handhelds so that you can communicate with your team in a local area. And that is just, it's just a good security practice to be able to talk with people. You know, maybe you're just over at the neighbors helping somebody clean up some downed trees in an ice storm or something like that, but you want to be able to talk at home. You know, if you left family members there or something like that, and like Jones MR pointed out, somebody shows up at the house, you can get the radio and kind of go deal with that situation or whatever. Radios are good. Next thing I've been thinking about personally, I haven't done yet, but I'm kind of looking at is, what about a portable repeater? I listened to a channel called Not a Rubicon. He's funny. He's a funny guy. Talks a lot about radios and all that kind of stuff. Does a lot on GMRS, which I do like GMRS. And I am going to get my ham license. I didn't get it before because I got distracted with COVID and a bunch of work crap, and I need to get back on it. But I do like GMRS. I think it's a really good system. And you can get a GMRS repeater for like $400 or something like that. And if you got a decent tower and a decent antenna system, you could probably set yourself up a 25-mile or so area where you'd be able to communicate with the repeater, even with handhelds or mobile units from your vehicles. You know, for a lot of people, they don't ever leave the 25-mile zone from their house. So that is that's a good thing to have, I think. All right, number 6, personal, medical, and dental. Take care of any medical and dental problems now before there's any issues with economics and that kind of stuff. When it comes to, we have a lot of bubbles in our economy right now, and a lot of those bubbles look like they potentially pop at any point. And if they do, doctors and dentists and all that kind of stuff are businesses. They are businesses. And maybe they'll be in business, or maybe they won't. Who knows? So go ahead and get that stuff taken care of now. Don't put it off. Number 7 is mental, physical, and spiritual health. Try to work towards functional fitness in all 3 of these areas. Physical fitness is important, but if you're in great shape and you don't have the interpersonal skills to go out and make friends because you're so paranoid that black helicopters are following you and chemtrails are poisoning everybody, you need to take care of that issue, because that is a mental health issue. All right. That you need to work on your emotional fitness. That's important. I talked to you guys about this in a separate video, and you should not feel, even with the stressful time that we have right now, with war, Russia and war and all that kind of stuff, if you feel like you're living with a sense of impending doom, go and talk to somebody. Just go and talk to a therapist. It wouldn't hurt. You know, you shouldn't live with the feeling of impending doom for a long period. That's very dangerous for your emotional well-being. And you need to be able to take care of yourself, because preppers are the people who are going to lead us out of recovery faster and better than anybody else. Okay, because we think about these things, right? So we need you in good shape. All right. All right, enough said on that. Number 8. So, okay, real quick, I'll answer Paul's question here. Paul says, why are hand crank weather radios exempt from EMP? They're not. They're not. They just should be stored in a Faraday bag, or wrapped with aluminum foil or copper foil or any other kind of conductive material, or stored in a Faraday cage. Done several videos on that in the past. You can take a look at those. But yeah, any kind of electronics that you want to make sure that you protect, you can just put them in a small little Faraday cage, or a small little like a Barron's 10-gallon can. It's like a can about, yay big, and it's a steel can, and it's real easy to tape up with conductive tape, and you put your stuff inside there, line it with cardboard, you're good to go. No problem. All right. All right. Yeah, it does. EMPs will affect things that are both powered and unpowered. There's some evidence to suggest that if it's not powered, it may affect it a little less, but a lot of it has to do with size It also has to do with sensitivity of the circuitry that's involved in it. So it just depends. Jared, he said, can you recommend a specific GMRS repeater or a link to one? Go to Not a Rubicon channel and look at his videos, and you'll see the one that he's got. He also set one up individually. It's a little bit more of a robust one than the portable one that he had for like $1,100, $1,200 or something like that. But yeah, check his channel out. He's going to have all the info for you there. Yeah, Gil, Steel Eagle brand 5-gallon cans. I recently purchased one of those, and man, those are awesome, awesome cans. They're expensive. I mean, I think I paid like $65 or $70 for it or something like that. Maybe it was even 80. I don't remember. But they're expensive cans, but they are well built and really, really easy to use. I thoroughly recommend them. 100%. I've been wanting to do a video on that. I just haven't got around to it yet. Let's see. Yeah, that's 100% true, Survival Comms. He says technically anything with a semiconductor in it is susceptible to an EMP. It actually, will it actually be affected? Nobody knows. Yeah, and a lot of it has to do too with like how long the antenna is on it. You know, how much space does it have? How much energy will it collect, and all that kind of stuff. That there's some pretty good evidence that things that are less than 24 by 24 inches, like in a cube, will probably receive less damage because they don't have enough surface area to gather that much energy. But again, it all depends. Plan B says, why no more trifecta? It all had to do with work, where I was working here in Indy. And so maybe when I move, we'll see if we can do that again. But just I couldn't do it anymore. That's basically it. Mark Olson says, my old lead lined photography bags make great Faraday bags once I insulate them. That's cool. Yeah. Dalton says, have you seen the news about several million egg chickens that caught the bird flu? It's local for me here in Palmyra, Wisconsin. They started warning everyone in their area to bring their birds inside. Yeah, it's been spreading all over the planet, really, in lots of different places, not just here. We had to kill a whole bunch of chickens and turkeys here in Indiana. I don't remember what the total numbers were, but it was several 100,000, I think, not too far from here. But yeah, it's going around, and that happens, you know, and luckily birds and all that kind of stuff have a pretty fast refresh rate, you know, in the population. So shouldn't be that big of a deal. Let's see. Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think the trifecta was awesome too. I really enjoyed doing it. I hated not to be able to continue it, but it is what it is. And those guys are awesome. It had nothing to do with them. It was all about people I worked for. Yes. So Alan Thomas says, what if you have it turned off? Can it still affect them if not plugged in too? Yes, it can still affect it. Plugged in or not plugged in, batteries in it or not batteries in it, it doesn't make any difference. The way that it works, just sitting in space, as the wave comes across it, it'll induce an electric charge into an item. It doesn't matter really if it's plugged in or not. If it's plugged in a house that has an EMP shield, according to what they advertise, the EMP shield will protect that device because it will drain the excess energy and shunt it to ground before it can build up enough heat to do any damage to the items. So that's why an EMP shield is kind of a cool thing. But yes, it doesn't matter if the batteries are in or batteries are out. It can still affect it. Liam Burkus says, never mind, I'm done. Bye-bye. Well, that's one possible thing. Okay, so number 8 on the list. I really didn't mean to go this long, guys. Number 8 on the list here is civic engagement. You need to be a part. I'm just looking at my little notes here. Need to be a part of the local government. Local government is the government that has the most power over your daily life. Think back to COVID. What were the governments that were the most tyrannical? State governments, local governments. They were the worst, right? You need to be involved with those so that you can make sure that they are changing rules in favor of freedom and liberty. This also puts you in a good position to know what's going on in your local area. So that's going to help you to be able to plan ahead for things as they're happening. Plus, it's also a training ground for becoming a higher level civil servant, which we desperately need people like you. Yes, you know who I'm talking to be involved in your local government. Okay. We need to. All right. Number 9 is cash. Shoot for having at least 2 to 3 months worth of expenses in cash in your home. Make sure it's well secured. Plan B, check my video on fallout, on how to remove fallout from water, but ponds is the answer instead of rivers. Okay. Number 10, home security. Make sure you've got doors that are difficult to enter, have exterior lights, have a home security alarm, wireless digital cameras, and motion sensing lights. Okay. Make your house a hard target so that when people are roaming from place to place looking for food, they go to someplace else instead of to your place, if possible. Okay. There's a buildup in civil unrest that happens. Okay. It's not always going to go just right to Mad Max. There's a buildup to this sort of thing over a longer period of time than you might imagine. And so if you can make your house a harder target, let them hit other softer houses first. Maybe they'll move out of the area and go somewhere else. So that's why you want to get your home security squared away. Number 11. Number 11 is personal protection, guns and ammo. Make sure you have a firearm with a flashlight and a plate carrier and be readily available in your room so that you can respond. But here's the deal. Don't just go buy that stuff unless you're also willing to spend the money to get trained. You must get trained. You cannot effectively, most people can't effectively train themselves. It is possible. I've met a few people who've done a pretty good job, but you need to go to training class and get some training. That is super important. Okay. Number 12, first aid and medical trauma kits, first aid kits, over-the-counter medicines, prescription medicines, antibiotics from Jase Medical, link in the description below. And these are all also aftercare supplies. You can get some of that stuff from Refuge Medical. I did the review on the bucket. Also get your hands on some training and some good reference material books for how to deal with it. Okay. Super important. Number 13, food production. Rhonda, what we're talking about, or R. Allen. All right. Food production, livestock, even in the city, hens and rabbits are usually allowed in most locations in the city. And you can even set up situations where you wouldn't even really know unless, especially if you had a privacy fence or something in the suburbs, people wouldn't even know that you had anything. Rabbits are super quiet. Meat is going to become more and more expensive over the long term, especially as we go through a fertilizer shortage, and that is coming. The agricultural fertilizer on the global market is already 5 times more expensive than it was a year ago before all this nonsense. That's a big deal. And that's gonna really increase prices in the food space and especially the meat space. Number 14, plant or build a garden. Buy a small greenhouse or build a small greenhouse. Buy several gardening books, plenty of seeds, and start a compost pile. Super easy. Supplement your own food production. For fallout, if you've got raised bed gardens or if you have a certain garden area, lay out a tarp, stake it down, weight it down with stones, rocks, whatever the case may be. Cover that garden area, right? After the fallout is done, you can pull up that tarp carefully, pour that fallout somewhere in a hole and bury it somewhere. And then you can go ahead and till that ground up and start planting. Now, you might want to wait a little while until all the fallout is done, but you get the idea. You can just cover it up. That's all you got to do. Number 15. Try to find a place to hunt and fish and trap. Try to learn these things now before it gets too crazy. Get a hunting license, get a fishing license. Consider purchasing a deer or turkey lease from somebody else who owns the land. One thing I used to do is I used to call up, I would get Google Earth and I would look at places that were within a close distance to my house, and I would find big plots of land. And then I would cross-reference that chunk of land with the county tax assessor site. The county tax assessor in almost every county has a GIS site where you can go and find a plot of land, and you can click on it and you can find out who the owner is. Then you take the owner's name and you put it into Microsoft or into the white pages online, and then find out what his phone number is. And then call that individual and just say, hey, this is who I am. I'm looking to see if you would be interested in allowing people to hunt on your property. And if they says no, I say, well, would you consider a lease? I'd be willing to pay you for that, you know, a couple $100 a year or something along those lines. Think about it. I was really successful at finding places to hunt like that, and got a lot of deer. I think one year I got six deer in 1 year. That's a serious supplementation of food sources. And I've done a whole video talking about how animals will still be around after a big SHTF event. You watch that video if you don't agree, but trust me, they'll still be here. You might have to go out further and I'll hunt at night and all these kind of things. There's a lot of stuff to that. But anyway, number 16, buy a the other thing I wanted to cover on 15 is if you have a hunting and fishing lease with somebody, that also might, depending on what situation we're talking about. I wouldn't do this in a nuclear situation, but if you had to leave your house for some reason in some sort of a survival emergency, going to your lease and camping there might be a good bug out location. Just think about it. Number 16, buy a deep freezer. This will help you get through short-term food shortages like a breeze. 17, you need to develop your own support group. A church home study group is a great way to meet and recruit people who are like-minded. Or if you're not a particularly religious person, you can always fake it. But even if not, then what about a neighborhood watch, or family or friends or neighbors? I did a video on this topic also. Don't join a group. Form your own. Okay. Number 18, need to develop sources of information. On-scene alerts is one that I do that I think is a really good source. I've been signed up with them for several months now, and I read their daily global intelligence briefing every day. It's a really good thing, and you also get alerts. I've gotten 2 of them today. As a matter of fact, one for an active shooter and one for, I don't remember what else it was, something else. But they'll keep you up to date on what's going on. And their global intel brief that comes to your email box every morning, or Monday through Friday, is really focused towards prepper and disaster type issues, which I think is really cool because it helps give you a realistic understanding of what disasters actually happen, both nationally and worldwide, and how often they happen. So that's a great thing to help you with your planning and stuff like that. Also, if you use the discount code Reality Survival, it'll save you 30%. And it'll, as long as you're a member, it'll send me $2 a month from your membership for up to 5 years, I think. So that's kind of cool. The other thing you can do, though, I talked about this in a video just recently. You can go to different websites. You can get signed up on their distro list from sites that you trust. I recommend checking out that video as well. You also need to develop a personal human sources of information in your local area. You should know at least 2 or 3 people on your street. Okay, normal suburban neighborhood, all that kind of thing. If you don't know personally 2 or 3 people on your street, you're wrong. You need to go out and meet them. You need to get to know them. Okay, they're not dangerous, probably. I mean, unless you live in Chicago. But I'm just kidding. Maybe not. Tom, you know I'm talking to you. All right. You don't have to be best friends with these people or anything like that, but you need to be more than acquaintances. You want to try to develop relationships with them, especially people who are in strategic locations like a local butcher or a local co-op owner or civil servants or whatever the case may be. Like, you know, get to know people in your area. Okay. And I'm almost done. 19, be debt free. See DaveRamsey.com. I don't know what his website is, but look up Dave Ramsey. Do his system. It's a great system. It'll get you out of debt quick, and it's all good financial practices. That's important. Number 20, make sure you have your admin areas covered. Consolidate all of your important papers, your ID, passports, birth certificates, marriage licenses, home title, deed, life insurance policies, wills, etc. Make copies, make secure copies, upload them to the cloud, have them in an emergency binder that you can grab and go in case of an emergency in your house. That's it. I'm done with those. What questions you guys got? All right. Alan Thomas says, aren't they going to take our properties? You're probably talking about the World Economic Forum. You'll own nothing and be happy, I think. No, I don't think they're going to be able to take anything here. I think that they will try in certain places, but like I said earlier, I'm fairly confident that they're going to fail on all fronts in that regard. Oh, wow. Gil said Granger had Eagle cans for $35 just before the Ukraine panic. Wow, that's awesome. Steve B says, new to your channel, do you really think war will happen between the US and Russia? As I said earlier, I think there's a 95% chance it will not happen. I'm talking about nuclear war. I don't think a nuclear war is going to happen. I think there's a less than 5% chance of that. Dry firing is a good practice, Mark. That's correct. Let's see. The Ozarks is good, Buffalo Bob. The Ozarks is good. They do have a ton of springs down there. The one thing with the Ozarks is the soil sucks in most places. It's a nasty red clay in a lot of it, and it's not great for farming, but you could do, greenhouse or raised bed gardens or whatever the case may be. But overall, the Ozarks is a great place. I spent a lot of time there as a kid. Really enjoyed it. Bringer of Change says the deer in Norway are still radioactive from Chernobyl. Yeah, it's probably true. I mean, if they're eating from, ground that has been contaminated and all that kind of stuff, they probably are. South Florida DCL, that's a really good question. He says, if you spent most of your life hunting and handling guns, what other kind of training would you need? So I think you could greatly benefit from two significant classes, two really good classes. One is some type of an advanced pistol applications, where you're learning to use and manipulate your pistol in strange and unusual positions and all that kind of stuff, and under weird circumstances and everything like that. Now, you could get some training on that just by being a member of like IDPA or what's the other one? US PSA. I don't remember what the acronym is, but the shooting competitions at local gun ranges, those are a great place to get some hands-on training that you don't have to particularly pay for, like going through a class. You can really learn a lot from those competitions and stuff. The steel matches, all that kind of stuff. That's going to give you a lot of really, really good practice. As far as carbine goes, same thing applies with like 3-gun competitions. You can go through and do those, so you're not having to actually pay for a class, but you can watch and learn from other people there, and you can get practice in doing some good drills and stuff, and it gives you a lot of good ideas for what to do at your home. But going to an actual tactical carbine class, learning how to use a carbine in a tactical situation, there's definitely a huge gap between that and knowing how to, use a 30-30 and a 45 long Colt. Like there's a difference. There really is. I grew up hunting and shooting and all that kind of stuff, and have had the opportunity to go to lots of different training classes with the military, and I've learned a lot. I mean, a whole lot. So I do highly recommend it. I think it's worthwhile. And I think if you spend what are they usually? They might be a little higher now, but you used to be able to go and find like a 2-day class for like $500 or something like that. And then you got to bring your own ammo, maybe 1,000 rounds or whatever. That's a good class that, what's his name? John Lovell does classes. I haven't taken his classes. I mean, there's tons of guys out there. You've seen all the YouTube rangers. You know, they're all going to be good. So Harley Hillbilly says, is it true that that a steel-clad garage is a good EMP protection? So probably not. Just as a structure, it might provide you some degree of protection, but if it's not grounded properly at each four corners, deep 8 foot, at least 8 foot ground on each four corners, it might just draw more because it's a huge antenna, and it could actually draw more energy in and around the area, kind of hold the energy, and then that's the best way I can think of it. But it really needs to be grounded if you're going to use it that way. Same way with like steel containers and stuff. People talk about cargo ship or cargo containers and stuff. There's a possibility that they may work to a certain degree if they're grounded appropriately. If they're not grounded, then it's probably not going to make much of any difference at all, or it could potentially make it worse. So yeah, that's the best I can do for you on that one. But I would try to do some research specifically on what you got going to know a little bit better. All right. Carrie Allender says nukes don't exist. EMP is not happening. Well, I can promise you they do exist. I used to work in the nuclear convoy fields out in Cheyenne, and I'm positive. All right, Gail, thank you so much for the $4.99. I appreciate that. That's great, man. Let's see, where else are we at? Sorry, I'm just trying to catch up. Buffalo Bob, I'm the same way, man. That's why I put a lot of emphasis on water. He says I'm a very finicky survivalist. Just got to have hot water, shower, and a kitchen sink. Yeah, I'm the same way. I need to have my shower. You know, I don't like to be nasty. I've done some Renaissance Marine TV. I've done some videos on starting prep groups several years ago to even a little bit more recently. You might check out AmericanPreppingAcademy.com. I think I have a whole lesson on it. I think that lesson's pretty long, like 30 minutes or an hour, that talks about great places to go to meet people who would be like-minded so that you can get to know them in an environment away from your home and different kinds of groups and stuff like that. And then, you know, once you get to know them a little bit, then you can kind of decide if you want to, you know, like invite them in or whatever. Plan B says, what if this war is like the bug, planned and over pushed? Well, I mean, what are you going to do? You know, I don't know how, if it were the case that were true, then given what we saw over the past 2 years, do you think that there's anything you can do about it? Because if there is, I don't know what it would be. You know, you're just going to have to take care of yourself. And that's really the whole thing. That's the whole kind of thing behind prepping, for especially the people that are new, that are watching this, is preppers have no desire as a group to overthrow the government or do anything bad against anybody in society. They just want to take care of themselves. They just realize that other people around them, that things can happen around them that could be bad. And so the preppers just want to be able to take care of their families, feed themselves, you know, get water for their family, keep their family safe, you know, with firearms. There's no offensive aspect to being a prepper, or there shouldn't be. Okay. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. Let's see. Yeah, South Florida. He says my sons are Marine instructor. Asked him where he learned to shoot that well, and now he's in the top 10 of the country for a sniper class. And his father, yeah, you can totally learn a lot of stuff. There's a lot of skills that can be taught. But if you've never attended a training class, I think you'd find it useful if you just knowing the basics of long range shooting and all that kind of stuff. That's one application, right? But from a prepping kind of standpoint, like I was just talking about, you're not really looking at more of an offensive situation in most circumstances, unless there was some weird thing. You're going to be looking more along the lines of defensive situations and how to handle those kind of things, and that's where you might get the benefit. Okay. Yeah, 100%, Mark. He says, prep out of confidence in your survival and not out of fear. I think that's a great place to end it. Holy cow, we went almost 2 hours. That is insanity. Thank you guys for watching. I'm going to be trying to do live streams Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, ? And so at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's the time that I've kind of got carved out for right now. So if you guys want to join me, then that's great. Bring your questions and I'll do the best I can to answer, or try to point you somewhere where the answer might be, if I'm not able to recall it right off the top of my head. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching. All the affiliate links are in the description below. I really, really appreciate those of you guys who have been using the affiliate links, those of you who have bought EMP shields and different things like that. That makes all the difference in the world. Well over 90% of the money that I make in this business, and this is a business for me, I do pay taxes on it, it is a business, is through the affiliate programs. So I really appreciate when you use those. YouTube just doesn't do really much in the way of paying anymore, especially for channels like this. So a couple of last questions before I wrap it up. Sorry, just saw him. Dave Farrell says, JJ, what food company gives you the best value for the money for long-term storables? That's a really tough question to answer when you talk about value. Mountain House, I would say, is probably the best tasting overall. They really, they do a good job. It's true freeze-dried food. It tastes very good. It's probably the best tasting. So if taste is important to you from a value perspective, Mountain House is probably the way to go, but they are the most expensive. If you're wanting stuff that is edible, it's got some flavor variety, it's going to keep you alive, and they're always in stock and at a reasonable price, then you can go to My Patriot Supply, which is the realitysurvivalfood.com link. I'll be honest with you, I don't think it's necessarily the best tasting. I think some of it's pretty good, but it isn't top of the list like Mountain House. But they're in stock, and that's hard to find nowadays. Augustin Farms is also pretty good. What is the other? There's a couple of different companies in the link below, and all the companies that I'm an affiliate with multiple different companies. They're all decent. I've tried different ones of their stuff, and I think they're decent. So check those links out. I don't recommend any companies that I don't personally think are okay. But yeah, I don't know how else to answer that. I mean, I'd have to know really what's important to you, Yep. All right. Cool. I am done. Don't forget to live the 6 Ps. Proper prior preparation prevents poor performance. Stay safe, guys.